Wait a second.
Are we ready?
We are ready.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nash, Benjamen. I'm the president of the Jewish Welfare Board, and I welcome all of you here tonight. On behalf of our board, our rabbis, and our community, I would like to welcome you tonight to a very special evening of warmth and teachings. Our community in Singapore sustains one of the most dynamic Jewish ecosystems in the world, and we are excited to see all of you here. Please, for those of you who have not been to our museum on the ground floor, if you have some time, drop in and have a look. It's just opened about a year ago. Very interesting exhibits, which I'm sure you will really like. If I have not met some of you personally, I just want to say a big hello, and our doors are always open at 24 Waterloo Street, and we hope to see you all regularly again. Thank you. You doing that?
Thank you, Nash. It's lovely to see you all. Your enthusiasm means so much, and we really have a full house tonight, so thank you. We have blessed to have Mordy Miller, Kabbalist, scholar, and Israeli media sensation. You've had a lot of articles recently, podcasts, you're everywhere in Israel. So we're very lucky to have you in Singapore. Tonight, Mordy will take us on a journey of knowledge that I'm excited to share with you all. My family made Singapore our home 30 years ago, and over the years we have witnessed firsthand how lucky this community is to have incredible members like Mordy join and contribute so much. Some of you will be contributing soon, and you know who you are. Mordy has conducted his research and work for the project. You will hear about it tonight in an entirely pro bono capacity. So thank you, Mordy. You've worked tirelessly for the community on this. Thank you, Mordy, and everyone who is working by his side for everything that you have done. Without further delay, I'll hand over to the Chief Rabbi of Singapore, Rav Mordechai Abergel, who you might recognize from his recent blessing of the F1 track. CNA, the Straits Times, is everywhere, but more importantly, is the spiritual leader and trusted counsel of our community. Rav Abergel.
Thank you very, very much for this wonderful introduction, and for joining us tonight, all of you. It's really inspiring when we get together and we try to look into the soul of the community. And of course, the famous expression comes to mind, that the Jews are called the people of the book. So we know, of course, a famous saying of Shimon Peres of blessed memory, who said that we're not only the people of the book, we're also the people of Facebook. I'd like to believe that we're more the people of the book than the people of Facebook, if you ask me. But you know, the saying goes that, tell me which book you're reading, and I'll tell you who you are. You walk into homes, and often, you find yourself looking into a kind of, furniture you have in this home, the design, the style, or whatever it is. I often look at books. You know, what kind of books are these people reading? Novels or books of history and so on and so forth. I think a book tells you about a person's passion, about his soul, about who he is, about his identity, where is he anchored. And that is why Mordy, where's Mordy? When I read your article, it's a fantastic article that came out in the press in Israel, which I hope will be translated in English. In that article, you pointed out to some amazing points. One of them is that Singapore is not just an economic success story. Singapore is also a spiritual success story for the Jewish community here in Singapore. We have 200 years of a thriving Jewish life. And all of this is expressed, is channeled through the books of our heritage. Because without these books, we would have no Jewish people. Heinrich Heine was once apprehended by some anti-Semites. And they said to him, "You Jews have no homeland." And he says, "You're wrong. We have a portable homeland."
Yeah.
A portable homeland of a Jew is his book, his Torah. And this is something which, it's priceless what you've done, Mordy, by documenting all of this, by doing the sort of academic research that only someone like you can actually produce. I know that it's going to nurture us in a unique way. You know, everyone here makes a contribution. Everyone here finds a calling. That's how we have this amazing community that we have. And to the many skeptics that I interact with, when I try to explain to them the history of our community, they will answer with all sorts of comments. No way, so far away, so long ago that it could be such an amazing community here. And the fact is that it's exactly what we had 200 years ago. Some people came and they thought about how is it that I'm going to spread the perfume of Jewish values? How am I going to share with others, not necessarily only with other Jews, but with society at large, what makes the Jewish people unique and what can actually help with Jewish values to build a healthy and a beautiful society. So, Mordy, I just wanted to mention in the name of all of us, on behalf of our community, how grateful we are for what you've done. Mordy, by the way, is a Ph.D. candidate at Ben-Gurion University in the Department of Jewish Thought, a Kreitman Fellow, and an Open University Fellow. So you have here a very accomplished scholar in front of you, someone who has an interest in the deepest Kabbalistic mystical teachings of Judaism. And I'll conclude just by saying that in Hebrew, the word sefer, for book, is actually connected to the word sapir. Sapir, of course, is a precious stone, because the idea of a book is that it shines. That's the idea. So I'm sure that tonight, what you're going to convey to us is that light that comes from these unique and special books that we have. Thank you very much, Mordy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so much all for being here at the Singapore Genizah Project, the books that illuminate the story of our nation's first Jewish settler. So, hello everyone. I'm Mordy, a scholar, love Jewish manuscripts, love being surrounded by old books. I'm a teacher. I'm also a student of my students, and I'm a proud dad of Ori, 5 years old, Daniel, 2 years old. Both studied amazing school, SMMIS, and the proud husband of Tal that's here tonight. And before we begin, we should ask the Genizah project, what is a Genizah? So, a Genizah is it's a repository for time-worn sacred manuscripts and ritual objects generally located in the attic or cellar of a synagogue. So we know in Jewish tradition we're not allowed to throw books out. We're not allowed to throw them away because they're sacred, as the rabbi mentioned, so we have to store them. And this is a great opportunity for people like us who come many years later to see these treasures. And this is not only a story of books in a synagogue, but the story of kings and queens from the canals of Venice to the back alleys of Calcutta. A tale that spans space and time across cultures, class systems, and borders. Welcome to the Singaporean Jews. So, let us start from the beginning. How did this all begin? Allow me to share with you. One day, Shacharit, morning prayer, morning service in the synagogue Magen Avot, the building right next to us. I find an old book and I cannot resist. I was surprised to see that this book was printed in Baghdad. What is a book from Baghdad doing here? And I was even more surprised when I realized that there is a handwriting that I cannot understand, even though it's in Hebrew. And even though that I have a lot of academic experience reading, deciphering Jewish manuscripts, some are 500 or 600 years old. When I open the book, I see in print there's Hebrew, but then next to it there's Arabic in Hebrew letters, also known as Judeo-Arabic. And I realized that this is a remnant of these first Jewish settlers that came to Singapore, and I realized that there's a treasure here, and I was asking myself, is it possible that this is not the only book? I also realized that if there are other books, then the books here are to teach us a hidden spiritual chapter of the first generation of Jews in Singapore. So we do have, obviously, the museum and books written. And this is another chapter. Books that weren't discovered up to now, weren't researched. Another layer. So what do we know? Before opening the books about the first Jews in Singapore, please follow the red arrow. And you can see a lot of them came in the early 19th century from Baghdad in Iraq, left as merchants, as traders, and got to India, Calcutta, Bombay, and from there some young, ambitious from these families continued their journey to Singapore. So we have already these first Jews coming here. And some of the most notable Jewish families in Singapore include the Sassoons, Ezekiel, Abraham, Elias, Ballas, Meir, Ephraim, Isaac, Benjamen, Layla, Kafi, Marshall, Daniel, and more. Please forgive me, I couldn't write. There's so many others. Some do arrive in Burma or Penang in Malaysia and then continue. And all of this, by the way, we can see in the books. Now, let's go back to the story. I was asking Rabbi Abergel, Rabbi Rivni, are there other books? And they said, yes, they are. They guided me, they directed me, and there they were, under staircases, scattered all over the place. We had to take them one by one. And today I can tell you there are over 800 books. 800 books. Some of them were 200 years old. So these are books from the first generations, never researched, and here we have a fascinating opportunity to learn from these books about the spiritual world, the cultural world, the religious world of these Jews. So let's begin. We're gathering the books, diving through history, and now when we have the books, we need to look at 8 different layers that uncover the secrets of the books. In this photo, you can see the Cairo Genizah. That's another Genizah. It's the largest Genizah in the world. And even though, some of you may not know, that already 100 years we know about this Genizah, not all of the material there has been researched yet. There's still a lot to look at and read and decipher. This is an enormous amount of books. By the way, do you know who this scholar is sitting there? Solomon Schechter. Another secret, we're from the same family. And these books were found in the attic of a synagogue in Cairo. Some of them were over 1,000 years. 1,000 years, and even though these are 1,000 years and ours are only 200 years, in both cases we're speaking about beginnings. The beginning of a community, the beginning of a spiritual life, of a cultural life. And this is why it's so important. So the first 3 layers, let's open the books together. This is one example. Remember, there are over 800. We want to ask, where was the book printed? So here we have in Hebrew, on the right top, Baghdad. So this book was printed by Baghdad and brought here by Baghdadian Jews. And some of you might notice that there are 3 Hebrew letters on the left of Baghdad. They stand for, that's a Yud, Ayin, and Aleph. It stands for Yagin Aleh Elohim. God may protect Baghdad. Because Jews, wherever they are, ask God to protect the place they live in. They cared about the place, and they always added this Yud, Ayin, Aleph. May God protect Baghdad. Then we ask, what's the title of the book? Here the answer is, whoever reads Hebrew can read Idrazuta. This is a part of the Zohar. We'll get to the Zohar later. Don't worry. And, okay, this is a mystical Jewish teaching, very deep teachings, and the publication year. Now, how do we know the year? Even if you don't read Hebrew, you can notice that there are no numbers. So, what is the year? So, a researcher should know, and obviously any learned Jew should know this, that every Hebrew letter has a numerical value. And the Jews, for the most part, never wrote the number of the year, but they wrote a sentence having to do with the content of the book, or quoting a phrase from the Torah, from the Bible. And can you see that some of the letters are enlarged? So only these letters we're counting. So we're gathering these letters, and we know the numerical value of these letters, and we're combining them together, and we reach a number. And that number is the Hebrew year. Now, after you know the Hebrew year, you can convert it to the year that we're speaking about, like that we all know. And in this case, it would be 1909. Right, 1909, as you see here written. So gathering the letters, this is what we sum up, 1909. And printed books were not only in Baghdad, but also in other cities. So many of the books were printed in Livorno, Italy. We know from the books themselves, many times I can learn from the books themselves about these connections between Jewish communities. So I know many times books were brought from Livorno to Baghdad, from Baghdad to Livorno, and from both places to India. We have the Amy family selling books, and the books are printed in India, and they write, there's like this, they write on the front page, whoever wants can get books from Livorno and from Baghdad. We sell these books. We sell also some other holy objects, and we sell books from Livorno and from Baghdad. So we know there was a very tight connection, and maybe some of you can already try to recognize the year. Bet Hey Daled Reish Taf, you see, Behadrat. Whoever gets it right after the lecture is going to get a prize. And we have also Calcutta, some books in Calcutta. This is one of our most old books, 1841. This specific book is Josephun, gathering of writings from Josephus Flavius, and you see here the Great Synagogue of Calcutta, and a Jewish family in Calcutta, and all of these are Iraqi Jews that are moving from place to place to place, bringing with them the books, and you can see there's also a stamp, right? You see on top, Solomon Calcutta. Now, going deeper into history through the pages, after these 3 questions, we want to ask who is the author of the book. Many of the books, and these are only some examples, or who is this? The Ben-Gurion. So you can read about him here, and he was one of the most well-known and this amazing rabbi. He was the chief rabbi of Baghdad. Later he arrived in Jerusalem, and it's obvious that many of the Jews here were so proud to be connected to him, and not only that, I can tell you that they were corresponding with him. They were asking him questions in Judaism. How should we act? What should we do? What we shouldn't do? And he learned from these Jews in Singapore about Singapore. He never laid his feet here, he never arrived here, but he knew a lot about Singapore through these correspondings. And I want to read something that he wrote in one of his books. By the way, this book is a commentary on Genesis, Bereshit, Genesis, and you can see here also in the slide, the floor above us, right above your heads, there is a stained glass with his image on it, the Ben-Gurion. So he wrote like this: "It is well known that the city of Singapore is another kingdom," meaning another rather than Baghdad, because he's living in Baghdad and he's corresponding with Jews in Singapore, and he's writing, "But there is more honesty and good leadership in the kingdom, that this kingdom," meaning Baghdad, "and that city," meaning Singapore, "is also safe from thieves and bloodshed and robbery, and 15 hands more than this kingdom. And the air is also smooth, and more people from the residents of the city of Baghdad went living there," meaning in Singapore, "in peace and rested them all around, both from the side of the government and the side of the weather." And he goes on and on to describe this amazing place called Singapore. And by the way, some of his religious law decisions were based on this. Sometimes, there was a dispute between married couples. Where should they live? In Baghdad or Singapore? Guess what was the answer? Singapore, right? It's after writing this, so we can find these in his writings. And the next question, so remember these, there were the 3 questions, and then the author, and then we want to ask who brought the book to print, right? Somebody decided to come to the printing house and to print the book. So in this case, we can learn a lot from whoever brought the book to print. In this case, we have Rabbi Yitzchak Farhi, born 7079. He was born in Tzfat, the holy city Tzfat in Israel, and he is what you call in Hebrew Shadal. Shadal stands for Shlucha de Rabbanan, a messenger of the sages, a messenger of the people living in Israel, and he was sent all around the world to Jewish communities to collect money, to support the Jews living in Israel. So this person that was also a rabbi, he was a traveler, and wherever he came, he decided to print Jewish books. And this book, I don't always know how it got to Singapore. This was printed in Belgrade. This is printed in the year Hatikunim. We see the letters, the Hebrew letters. So let me reveal, this is 1851. 1851. And he's printing this book. This is also part of the Zohar. And we know the same year, he printed another book in Livorno. So he had this journey from Livorno to Belgrade, back to Israel, and we know only 1 year later he passed away. And this is his gravestone. So this might be his last book, or one of his last books that he printed. And we have it here. So we learn so much history also and by just asking who brought the book to print. We also want to ask about the publishing house. And here I have an interesting anecdote. One of the main publishing houses belonged to Rabbi Ezra Reuven Dango, who was the chief rabbi of Baghdad. A few weeks ago, I was praying here in the synagogue, morning services, and when I was done, I met this new fellow, and I asked him for his name, and he said, "I'm Josh." I said, "Nice to meet you. Where are you from?" "Hong Kong, just arrived to live here, to be part of the community." And I told him, because that's pretty much the first thing I tell a stranger I meet. I do this Genizah project. I'm very proud of this. I think this is so interesting. And he said, "Where are the books from?" I said, "From Baghdad." He said, "My great-grandfather was the chief rabbi of Baghdad." I was sure he's exaggerating, right? Like everybody's grandfather was like a king. And so I said, yeah, that's very impressive. What was his name? And then he said, Rabbi Dango. And when I heard Rabbi Dango, that was a shocking moment. And I said, yes, he was the chief rabbi of Baghdad. And not only that, you should know that your great-grandfather's books, his printing house, are here at the bottom floor in the synagogue. You should come and see them. And since then, obviously I sent him. And some of the books also have this photo of Rav Dango is from one of the books. So some of the books also have not books necessarily printed by him, but by others that respected him. He was a great leader. By the way, for some years, he was also the rabbi of Rangoon in Burma. That's also another interesting anecdote. Now, after here, you can also read a bit more about Rav Dango, see his family. I think also one of his sons was a rabbi in Shanghai. And after we ask these questions, we also want to look at the handwritings. And this is very, very important. When we look at the handwritings, and almost every book has handwritings. In the front page, in the back page. And by the way, just before I continue, I said I couldn't decipher the writing. So the fact is that the handwriting is so hard to decipher because Jews, many times, they're in contact with the places they live in. So many times there's mutual influences, and one of them is the handwriting. So handwritings of Jews that lived amongst Muslims many times looks like Arabic, and it's almost impossible to decipher. The handwriting was very much affected, influenced by that. And here, for instance, we have this is a very moving. When I saw this, I said, "Wait a minute, is this the David Marshall?" And whoever of you who doesn't know him, this is now the opportunity. So there's a book that belonged to Honorable David Marshall, that was a Singaporean lawyer and politician, who was the founding leader of the Singapore Labour Front. He played a major role in Singapore's independence movement, and he was the first chief minister of Singapore from 1955 to 1959. There's so much to say about him. He was widely considered to be one of the founding fathers of modern Singapore. He was the founder and president of the Jewish Welfare Board. He was ambassador of Singapore to France, and please forgive me because I can go on and on. And this is a book dedicated to him. Here you can see on the left, there's one of the first meetings of the Jewish Welfare Board, and some of you sitting here remember him, and I was so pleased to hear that his daughter is here tonight with us. Thank you for coming. And these things we find in the Genizah. These are the kind of things that we can find. So sometimes you have an ancient book with relatively new writing. Sometimes, you know what? Let's see for ourselves. Let's see for ourselves. There's what kind of writings do you think appear on these books? Many times people write their name. What else would they write? They write where they bought the book from, sometimes where they're living at the moment, how much they paid for the book. That's interesting. And somebody writes how much he paid for the book. I didn't really understand yet why, and many times the book is dedicated to the synagogue, to the community. Many times there's an anniversary of the passing, right? The beloved ones, father, mother, so people want to write the dates for them or for others to remember, to notice the date and maybe pray for the elevation of the souls of their beloved ones. And sometimes they dedicate it in their memory. So we can see a few examples. Here on the left, the book printed in Warsaw. So here we also have it in English, the numbers. We have 1874. But we see the owner writes he's living in Bombay. So it's from Warsaw, but he's living in Bombay. Some of you might be able to detect the word Bombay, Il Bombay. And again, we have Yud Ayin Aleph, may God protect Bombay. And here he's wishing for the elevation of his father's soul. Another example, and this is one of my favorites, this is a book written by Rabbi Yeshua Halevi. He was born in Morocco in Tetuan. And this is his book. And he dedicates the book that he wrote, and this is his handwriting and his autograph, to his older brother Yehuda. And now he's sitting in Lisbon. He's from Morocco. He's sitting in Lisbon. He writes. You might be able to see the words Lisboa. That's Lisbon. And this is 1883. He's presenting this to his brother, and he loves his brother. And when I read about Rabbi Yeshua Halevi from Morocco, I realized that his father passed when he was only 10 years old. And I can imagine how close he was to his brother, to his older brother. And this really moves me because I'm asking myself, this is a copy of the brother himself, of this great rabbi from Morocco. How did it get here? Did he live here? Did he pass by? Was he traveling? Imagination can go wild here. We have also many writings in Arabic. If any of you can read them, please contact me. I do not read Arabic. I need help. There are some pages in Arabic, and many times there's combinations, Hebrew and Judeo-Arabic. All Hebrew letters, and then I'm reading and deciphering, and it's taking me some time. And then I realize I deciphered the word, but I cannot understand the meaning of the word. And I realized they moved from Hebrew to Arabic to Hebrew to Arabic. Right? These people spoke Arabic because these are the first generations. And obviously stamps. Not only handwritings, and can you spot a name that you know? Well, one of them is sitting here, Rabbi Abergel. And we have others. Rabbi Shababo was a rabbi here, and some of you may have known the names. And obviously we have dozens and dozens and dozens of stamps. These are only as much that can fit in one slide. And one of the things that we've done, and when I'm saying we, is me and Professor Ian McConaughey, who's sitting here, was so generous to offer me to work with one of his students. And he asked the student if she would be willing from NTU to be a research assistant, and she helps me here and there, and she traveled with me to the Jewish cemetery. And we were trying to find out if there are some names that we don't recognize that we can find on the gravestones. And maybe there's some additional information about these people. And we found some amazing things there. So this is from the visit in the cemetery. And another thing that we can find is historical moments. What is this? So what we're seeing here is a book printed in Oxford University, 1936. Okay, all of these books are from here. Okay, it's less than a minute walk. Okay, we gathered these books. We'll get to this soon. And a book brought from England. This was printed at Oxford University. A prayer book for high holidays named in Hebrew Machzor. And we see here the Jews are blessing the king and queen of England. So what is this note doing here? So, you know history. 1936, there was a change of a king, right? There was a coronation of King Edward VIII, year of printing the book. So the blessing was for Edward VIII. But the same year, there was the coronation of King George VI. So there had to be an update. So they printed a new note and stuck it in the prayer book. By the way, I'm asking myself, how did this book arrive here? We know that some British soldiers from World War II ended up living here with their families. There's some evidence, we know this, and by the way, I found even 2 Sidurim prayer books from the British Army. So these soldiers brought them with them. So much history can be learned, and here's another example, and we're reaching the end soon of the lecture. This is a Star of David. Can you spot the Star of David? On the bottom of the front page. Now, I remember that I never saw the Star of David. What is the Star of David doing here? It's not part of the printing pattern in Vivolo. And then I looked at the year. What's the year? Tafshin Chet, 1948, establishment of the State of Israel. So obviously the same year this was printed, the establishment of the State of Israel, so was printed also the Star of David. Also, one of the highlights would be to find books that you won't expect to find. What would we expect to find in synagogues? Prayer books, Bibles, from all kinds. Sometimes maybe poems to sing on Shabbat. So many different books. But there's some books that don't belong necessarily in a synagogue. These are books of learning. Jews, after prayer, before prayer, between prayer, found time. These are extremely successful people, hardworking, and they find the time not only to pray, not only to come to service, but to take a book and study together. So what are these books? Many times Zohar books. So obviously there's also Jewish law, halacha, but also a lot of Zohar books. Zohar is one of the most important book of Kabbalah. Jewish mysticism, you can read a bit about it. According to Jewish tradition, it was written by 1st century Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, son of Yochai, and was revealed in the 13th century again, right after it was concealed. And this book, many different printings of this book are found here in the synagogue, and I'll tell you something else. After over 150 years after these books were learned here, a few weeks ago, we started with the blessing and the guidance of Rav Abergel and Rav Rivni to learn again the Zohar. To learn again the Zohar, to gather together part of the Zohar called Hidrazuta. It's the telling of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author, passing away. It's amazing. And we gather, and this is what they've done. It's just a short break, right? 150 years. That's it. We're continuing now. There's a continuity. So these books are being used. And another very, very moving thing would be not only to see the handwriting, but to detect the word Singapore. Do any of you Hebrew readers can find the word Singapore? Okay, I see some of you can. So it's the second line in the middle, okay, circled here in red, Singapore. So many times when we see this kind of handwriting, we know it's old, and we know these are people probably doing this 1860, 70, 80, okay, around that time, writing in this kind of handwriting. That's handwriting of Jews that were probably born in Baghdad, first generation, and many times they don't come directly to Singapore, but some of these mention Singapore. We have here at least another 3 or 4 examples found up to now. By the way, we've not gone through all the books yet, okay? Another lecture is to come, if you want. There's a lot yet what to say, and not only that, sometimes you can find things in old books, you can find information about people living these days, or a few years ago in the community. Some of you can maybe, some of you know some of these people. And I want to tell you about the right photo. This is a story from today, actually. So some of the books, this is an old book, but it was rebound, right? It was rebound, and to use the new the new cover to stick it together, they use sometimes notebook pages from school. Little kids are doing exercise, writing words. This kid, how much, I don't want to read the grade here, but this is an exercise, right? Doing exercise, and all of a sudden I realized there's a name here, Jonah Elias. I don't know who Jonah Elias is, but listen to this. You won't believe me, I know, but this is a true story. Today, after this recent Saturday, so as the Rabbi mentioned, there was this article published in Israeli press about the Singaporean Jews. A lot of people, Jews around the world, are very interested in this. Like the Cairo Genizah, so what is this? And many, not only Iraqi Jews, but many Jews. So this was published, and since then I'm getting all kinds of emails, and one of them was today, and someone said, I was born in Israel, but my father and my great-grandfather were born in Singapore. And then she sent me, it's only a few hours ago, I'll believe me, it's going to be my witness. And she said, here are their names. I was just interested. And it turns out that Jonah Elias is her grandfather's brother. Amazing, right? A few hours ago. Not to say a miracle. And this is, you see the dates. There's a date here, 1935. That's the year of the birth of her father. And you can see also some names. There's a lot of these notes that people put in the prayer books, just names to mention, to bless to pray for during the prayer, for good health, right? Some of these people may be ill, maybe need other kinds of help, and we have names, and so many. So it's not only the books, but it's also what's in the books, inside. Never throw pages you find in books, right? So there is a lot to do. You can see here in the photo, one of my loyal helpers sitting here, Yosef Yitzchak Rivni, helping me a lot, and also Professor Tamash, and that's sitting here, Mekani, and Professor Tamash Mekani, and Professor Ian Mechanical. So we have a team, and so many people. I want to mention some names now are helping me with this. So many people are helping me with this, and you see the cabinet with the books. Can you imagine? Only 2 or 3 months ago, this was empty. So it's like the books are, right? They're rising from the dead, right? Who knows where they were? Who knows who would? So people knew they're there, but only gathering them, and there is a lot to do yet. Reviewing, cataloging, scanning, recording the stories, recording the project, perhaps producing a book, a film, and so on and so on. By the way, I did put a QR code. I thought if any of you want to receive updates, I thought it would be a good idea that I should maybe once, I don't want to commit, but once in a while, because I find on a weekly basis new information. So if any of you are interested, you can fill up your basic information and I will send it your way. And before questions and answers, I want to say that I don't envy the Mordy that's going to be here in 200 years, because you won't believe how many books the community has today. In the rabbi's offices, in the synagogues, there are thousands and thousands of books. It's going to be more than one team working on that. And another I think special thing is that he's not going to find only books that were printed in Calcutta, Rangoon, or wherever. He's going to find books that were printed here by the community in Singapore. And we have several examples. One of them is the Tanya book that the Rivni family printed, and so many others that are printed. I think on a weekly basis, booklets and sheets, and this is very, very special. And all of this couldn't happen without the tremendous help of so many people. I'll just briefly mention some names. This is important for me. So thank you very much, first of all of you who came here. And, it's late at night, and you made the effort, and you came, and this means a lot to me. Thank you very much. And thank you, President of the Jewish Welfare Board, Nash Benjamen. Thank you, Chief Rabbi of Singapore, Rabbi Abergel. Thank you, Benjamen, Cheif and Laurence Harel. You don't know how much they helped me, really, so much. So thank you so much. This is a lot thanks to them, this presentation. Thank you, Rav Rivni and Rav Zabadi. And it's not something that we just should take as a given that rabbis will tell someone, a newcomer, right? How I'm not here that long, and say, Mordy, you found the books, we trust you. Go for it. Do whatever you think is right. We support you. We're going to help you. And you can ask them. I send them texts about historical events, and they always respond and always help and always share more and more. And this is very, very special. Thank you, Hannah Inga. Thank you very much. Thank you, Laura Lau. Thank you, Yosef Yitzchak Rivni. And as I mentioned, thank you, both are here. Professor Tamash Mekani and Professor Ian McConaughey are so helpful in so many ways. Thank you, Ariel Kohelet. I didn't mention he's from Italian roots, and he's helping us a lot with preserving the books, physical preserving the books. A lot of them are from Livorno, so we have an interest there. And thank you, Fernanda Tan from NTU. Many others offer to help, hopefully will help. And there are a lot that are contacting me. Next week, students from Princeton are going to be here, and they're from Iraq originally, their parents or grandparents, and they want to look at this and see if they can help. And on Sunday, there's going to be a TV interview in Israel about this, so anyone who's interested. Thank you. Time for questions and maybe answers. Thank you.
Q&A.
Yeah.
A few questions?
Yeah. Q&A. Yes, perfect. So anyone?
Any questions?
Can I ask sort of a very basic question?
Yeah.
What's the ultimate goal of the research? And part of it is, I'm just curious the direction you take this research, because you pulled on a really interesting thread, which is super impressive, and you could go a bunch of different directions, right? You could go really deep on the history of Jews in Singapore, the connectivity to other global communities, and study the books themselves. I'm just curious to know, is it an important project in its own right, and what direction do you plan to take it in? If there's an answer to that question.
So thank you for the question. I think that if you're asking what direction I see this going to, so I think that it's probably not going to be enough to gather the books together and tell you about this, but also I think that a lot of unknown information is gonna reveal itself thanks to this. Obviously, I would like to produce a book that's gonna gather a catalog. It's gonna contain a catalog. It's gonna contain scanning the front pages and stories of many of the books. Many of the books have special stories, so kind of bring about to share with the Jewish world, or anyone who's interested, obviously, not only Jews, but this unique history that was unknown. So I feel like this is a lot of responsibility. This is very exciting. I think a book, perhaps even a film that we're thinking about, can really get to so many people. And as I said, there was stories coming and information, and I feel like it's a chapter in history of not only Iraqi Jews, but Indian, people who lived in India, and can tell us about a lot about the East and about connections between communities and the spiritual life. And this is so interesting. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mordy. I have a question. What was the most surprising thing out of your research for you?
What was the most surprising? So I think there's a lot of surprising moments. First of all, I'm surprised at the fact that every book has a history. I think this is something I really learned. I heard about there's this, right? Today in academia, people are more and more realizing that it's not only about researching a title, a book title, I'd say but also a specific book. Like every book has its own life. That was amazing to see that. I can see a book, it's a prayer book. I pray, I know the words, there's nothing new. Supposedly there's nothing new in this book. What can I find here? But then I see the handwritings, I see who brought it to print, who printed it, so these questions. And there's some books that there's so many new answers that really excite me and surprise me. Yeah.
Thanks, Mordy. You mentioned briefly how wonderful it is to have a repository that's gone back so long. I think Rabbi Abergel touched on that with how lucky we are to be in Singapore. Maybe you can elaborate a bit on that in terms of the contrast between being able to research books that have been untouched in a peaceful place for Jews to live for so long versus what that might be like somewhere else.
That's such an important and interesting point, and I feel like your question already has the answer in it. Obviously, well, this is something I had to share with you. I'm Ashkenazi. Yes, and so as opposed to if we're thinking about books in Europe, right? They weren't fortunate enough to survive, and here we have, as you said, this amazing opportunity, books that were preserved for so many years, and we can track them back to the beginning. This to itself is not something that's so common, unfortunately, in the Jewish world, where Jews are also exiled from place to place, and sometimes they need to protect themselves and to move on, and we all know the history, and this is really, I think, very unique in that way. Yeah.
Last question.
Then we'll get to the
Thank you, Mordy. You obviously have the passion for what you're doing. There are many, many more books you're going to go through. What would you like to see the community in Singapore ultimately do with these books? What would you like to see?
Thank you. So there is. Thank you for. What would I like to see? I think that first of all, gathering these books together in one place that can be accessible. However, it should be protected. We have to see how can this, from one hand, the books being preserved, but from the other hand, we don't want them to die behind the glass. Right. So I think we might need to make some, this is not for me to make a decision, but decisions should be made maybe of different kinds of old books, some that shouldn't be touched. They're too old, this is too delicate, and some books maybe should be reused, or at least allow people to come and look at them and learn from them and pray from them. Some of the books I would like to see in the museum, presented in the museum. And obviously many of the books that we can't present or can't allow people to access, we should find a way to document them in a book. Scan maybe part of them. I think that's very, very important. This book, I have this vision of a book. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mordy. My question is, do you think that this can be the beginning of an expansion of other communities in Asia to also start looking into the books that they have and creating their own Genizah, or maybe making a broader Genizah of Asia.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. Not only that, I'll share with you that I have one request. Someone did have a request for maybe communities in India today to try and expand this. I have to see, we don't, we're a team here in Singapore, but yes, maybe be in touch with some people who can take responsibility and I think this is also going to teach us a lot about the connections between the communities themselves. A lot of people are doing so much research, but they never really got here physically, and they never got to really deal with this part of history. I got an email this week from one of the heads of the Iraqi Heritage Center in Israel that produced so many books. Some of them, by the way, were with the help of people from this community, that they donated and they helped and they encouraged printing these books. And he told me, I was always in the back of my mind, what happened to the books in Singapore? But the fact was, he never did something. He never emailed anyone. He never picked up the phone to Abergel and asked, do you know anything about this? So there can be many reasons. People are occupied and so busy with important things, but now that they know that we're doing this, then they want to know more. And he himself already is trying to direct and ask, do you know about this? Do you know about that? So things are beginning to start, and I hope this is gonna expand. I hope my Ph.D. supervisors aren't too mad at me because I'm supposed to be finishing my Ph.D. But yeah, I think this is important, and they also realize the importance of this. So yeah. And then
I wanted to ask you, Mordy, what are the biggest challenges you're facing when doing your research on books?
Thank you. So I think there are many challenges. I think one of them would be language. Arabic, as I mentioned, some of the books, unfortunately, aren't in good condition. Not a lot, but some are, and I think that's also something that we might want to consider. There are probably technologies today that can allow to decipher some of these pages that are very, very hard to really decipher. And a lot of information that I need to learn from scratch, because this is not my expertise. I did do a lot of Kabbalistic manuscript deciphering, but I never really researched this area, this kind of thing, and I'm very fortunate to do this, but I have to really make up for a lot, to learn a lot, to read a lot. There were some great books produced about Jews in Singapore. I think all of them, or most of them, are here in the museum. So these are some of the challenges.
Hi, thank you. I was wondering, could you tell us about what % of the books you've gotten through? You said you haven't gotten through all of them, and could you tell us a bit more that you may have learned about the life of early Jews in Singapore?
Thank you. So in terms of percentage, I would say maybe about 60%, something like that.
Not
what?
Not great.
60%, yes.
Done.
60% done. I always feel like maybe I missed something, so I'll probably do it again. Right? And sometimes when I go back to a book, I find things. But 60% like I went over, and the other question was the life of, yes. So I think that the Iraqi identity, I think, is something that's very obvious, looking at the books, having so many rabbis from Iraq having their books here, but not only, also rabbis that were just rabbis in neighboring countries of the region. sometimes I find a book, I don't understand what it's doing here, and then I find out, let's say Rabbi Eliyahu Chazan, there's a lot of his books. What is special about these books? So I understand, okay, he was a rabbi in neighboring countries, so this is something that, so I see there's also a lot of pride in this, and as I mentioned, I think there was a focus on Kabbalah, and like Jewish mysticism, and I see how dominant was the Arabic language, and I can learn, more and more. I think almost every book. Sometimes I find a lot of one kind of book, so I realized that Jews gathered around that book. Like sitting together and learning together, not only one Jew was learning this and one another, but they were having a gathering. So that's also something, so the amount of books can teach you. And I always ask myself, how many books didn't survive? How many things, but, right, that's not helpful. Not a helpful thought. But probably a lot is missing. So was that the last question?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Just wanted to mention something that Mordy wrote in this article. He said he prefers a book that's only 200 years old than a book that is 1,000 years old. It depends where the book comes from. If it's a book that is 200 years old, but that gives you the genesis of the community, it's better than a book that is 1,000 years old, that just gives you a little bit of a point in history, in a much broader context. And I think, this is really the idea of what you're doing. It gives us an idea of who we are. Where did we come from? Where does it all start, right? Which I think is of tremendous importance. Those who'd like to help Mordy to continue with his project, there's the idea of maybe writing a book about it or maybe making a movie. Those who want to partner with him in this project are most welcome, and of course you can contact him directly and discuss this with him directly. Thank you very, very much for joining us, and of course, thank you, Mordy, the star of the evening, for doing this wonderful work again. Thank you to all of you for coming and joining us tonight. Thank you.